Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim, Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, and we will cover two verses, 19 and 20 today. There are well-defined laws in the world. And these are the references, and all excerpts in this talk are taken from the meanings of the Quran, volume 1. It's good to revisit this meanings of the Quran because there is quite a lot there which explains not only these verses, but verses before and after as well, providing us some link. And there is a very good summary as well at the end of chapter 2. This is our contact. Recap verses 16 to 18, which we covered in our previous presentation. Human creation is part of the deliberate plan of Allah, and man is bestowed with intellect and reasoning together with choice and intent, in order to create a new world in this finite physical life by becoming a companion in the creation of Allah. For this, man is provided with the guidance of the Quran. And we have gone through this point previously as well, that the guidance is provided to create a new world, and in which our desires, everything comes under the guidance of the Quran rather than under unbridled desires. Those who do not follow or do not wish to follow the guidance of the Quran, they think that their life has no higher purpose. And we can figure it out. Ask anyone, what do you think is the purpose of life? And the answer will be different from the one who is following the Quran and the one who is not following the Quran. And as a result, tend to become an impediment on the path of the Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen. The Quran provides guidance to Mu'mineen in this regard by pointing to the character failings of such people and refers to their behavior and conduct in these verses. It informs about their psyche of going for immediate benefits based on self-interest, thus ignoring the long-term view of human life, which takes into account the life of the hereafter. Here it points to the effects of following the path of Kufr and Munafiqat, which lead to becoming deaf, dumb, and blind, which means that such people cannot benefit from the self-development put forward by the Quran, for which they need to use their intellect and reasoning. The Quran illustrates this aspect of the human psyche by citing metaphors from human experiences in the world. An overview of today's presentation. Continuing from the previous similitude noted in 217, where a man kindled fire when it lighted all round him, Allah took away their light. Whoever presents the guidance of the Quran, and the Quran calls itself light or nur, others need to benefit from it by removing the darknesses of their life. The next metaphor is the similitude of a rain-laden cloud from the sky together with its darkness, thunder, and lightning. And instead of paying attention to the physical signs of it, people just put their fingers into their ears to keep out the noise of the thunderclap and never think beyond the immediate effects. They need to look out for the signs in the world around them in order to find a higher purpose of life. Instead, when the higher purpose of life is presented before them, they display kufr, i.e., reject it, not realizing that the laws of Allah encompass everyone in the universe. Taking the above similitude a bit further, the Quran states that lightning all but snatches away their sight. Every time the light helps them, they walk therein, and when the darkness grows on them again, they stand still. They need to use their hearing and sight in order to reflect on these signs of Allah. These physical signs and the resulting reaction of man to these are all part of the scales defined by Allah in the functioning of the world and the universe. There is nothing in the outer world or the human world which does not have precise scales and laws established by Allah. The Quran helps us to discover the functioning of these scales and laws in order to help establish the system of Deen. The first verse of today's presentation, verse 19, physical signs in the outer world point to the functioning of the law of requital. أو كصيب من السماء فيه ظلمات ورعد وبرق يجعلون أصابعهم في آذانهم من الصواعق حذر الموت والله محيط بالكافرين. Or the simile of their communal and economic system, which is established according to their self-made laws, is like that of a rain-laden cloud coming at an appropriate time, but together with it, pitch black darkness, thunder, and the flash of lightning, i.e., the causes of destruction included with the means of sustenance. These people desire that they should obtain the benefits of the rain, but remain protected from the thunder and lightning. The technique which comes to their minds for this is to press their ears with their fingers, so that they neither hear these terrifying noises nor end up in the jaws of death. These simpletons do not even know that the destructions caused by lightning do not enter via the ears alone. They are spread out across the whole environment, i.e., they think that if through the use of intellect they could close those loopholes through which, as per their thinking, destructions manifest, then it is possible to remain protected from the consequences of the wrong system of life. But their outlook is immature. The law of requital of Allah remains encompassing from every direction that nation which refutes the realities. And this is a very interesting verse, and we should concentrate on Wallahu muhitum bil kafirin. And if we look at it a number of times in reverse, then these verses, this metaphor will make sense, and we can figure it out, that what Quran is trying to tell us. Questioning material successes is part of seeking guidance. The translation of the verses or another similitude is that of a rain-laden cloud from the sky. In it are zones of darkness and thunder and lightning. They press their fingers in their ears to keep out the stunning thunderclap, the while they are in terror of death, but Allah is ever surrounding those who are kafirin. And this is, we can figure it out that what meanings have been expressed in the previous slide and this translation, there will be a difficulty in understanding what the Quran is trying to tell us through this simile. So that is the point which we should keep in mind as we go through further explanation. In the introduction to verse 217, 2 points were noted. Now let us discuss the second one. The first point was regarding Iman, Kufr, and Munafiqat, that people who do not accept Iman, then how do they display Kufr, and some even go for Munafiqat or hypocrisy. I.e., this point that these people who gain the material benefits of worldly life at the price of the divine permanent values think to themselves that we are in great profit. But in reality, this business of theirs is not profitable, rather it is detrimental. And that is why people do kufr and shirk as well as hypocrisy, because they do not wish to give up the material benefits of life, and they think that life is all about gathering these material benefits, never mind how they get it. In reality, only that business is profitable which is carried out within the remit of the divine values. By business is not meant merely economic transactions, it means the question of profit and loss within every sphere of life. A discussion about profit and loss or good and evil has already been carried out, but for an explanation of the example that the Quran refers to here, further elaboration of this issue is required. So we'll look at some further aspects of profit and loss and good and evil. The issue of good and evil. In the physical universe, there is nothing intrinsically good or evil. It is its use which makes it good or evil. Or you could say that Allah has created everything for good only. It is man who makes it evil by using it wrongly. Water sports life. The whole of life is dependent on it. It bestows fresh life to dead land. Vigorous crops grow due to verdant and lust fruit-bearing orchards emerge from it. So much so that water plays a very fundamental role in life and all that is needed for it as the means of nourishment and strength for it. But the same water man stays alive by drinking, he can also die by drowning in it. But when that same water, by bursting its banks, assumes the shape of a flood, it becomes the cause for widespread devastation. This is the same condition of everything in the physical universe and of every force of nature. So we can figure it out that how we utilize these forces, and these forces have their own significance in our life. Allah has created every one of these for khair and barakat, which means good and benefit. It is their incorrect use as a result of which they become the cause for evil. In other words, good and evil is concealed within everything. The problem to be solved by man is to determine what is the technique through which these can be made a cause for good and benefit, while remaining protected from their harmful aspect, to extract constructive use from them instead of destructiveness. This is the reason that the Quran has taught the supplication for protection from the evil that exists within things. And Quran says, min sharri ma khalaqa, from the mischief of created things. Continuing on the issue of good and evil. In other words, this desire that whatever Allah has created, it does not become evil. It should remain good. If some things had been good and some others bad, then a supplication to remain protected from the evil things would have been taught. Scientific disciplines certainly inform us how beneficial results can be obtained from the things of the universe and how these can become evil. But they cannot tell us how to make man amenable to this so that he uses them for good and does not use them for evil. So it is man's choice. Things are there. Events do happen, for example, in the natural world, but it depends on us what kind of choices we make. This is outside the domain of function of these sciences. So science can only tell us what it is. It cannot tell us what it ought to be, what it should be. So we have to make choices. Moving beyond the physical or external world, let us look at the human social domain and see whether human intellect has been able to devise such a system here which can be profitable for the whole of mankind, i.e., its outcome is khair for everyone. Using its own empirical technique, the human intellect has also stumbled around extensively in search of this, but has not been able to succeed in this yet. The best doctrine it has been able to discover to date is known by the term utilitarianism. According to this doctrine, that act is khair or good, as a result of which the maximum number of people gain the maximum benefit, i.e., the greatest good of the greatest number. And we should keep this aspect in mind because this is the cornerstone of the man-made system, and the people who are in power, this is what they present as an argument to favor the capitalist system. Next slide is no man-made system can be beneficial for whole of mankind. And that is how we should view the man-made system in the light of the Quran. From the point of view of this doctrine, the aim is the benefit of the majority. The question is this: are the ones who will be left out not human beings? And that is an important point for us as students of the Quran. What is the fault of those who are left out? And that is why majority is authority, or majority in democracy is wrong. It produces an evil system. On what basis will they be deprived of this benefit? Because they are human beings, they are equal human beings like anyone else. So even leaving out one human being whose needs are not met, according to the Quran, that is a crime. They have no answer to this objection. That is why Quran puts so much emphasis on yatim and miskeen and on keeping the means of sustenance available for everyone. In the political world, it is this very doctrine which personifies democracy. The foundation of democracy is also based on the rule of majority. Here, that same question arises again. What crime has the minority committed that not only are they deprived of the right of government, rather they are handed over into the subjugation of other human beings like themselves who have acquired a majority by some method or another? The human intellect has not yet been able to devise any such system in which this aspect of shar does not exist. They simply cannot devise any other system. In its every system, whether it is political or economic, khair and shar, khair means good, shar means evil or bad, exist as an inseparable mixture. In the verse being discussed, the Quran has elucidated this very fact via a tangible simile. Next slide is analyzing the verse a bit further. Now, some of the terms used in this verse and the next verse are noted over here. Saib, and a cloud producing rain, but that rain which comes at precise time and is in the correct place. Next word is Rad, the thunderclaps from clouds. Then is Barq, the flashing of lightning. And next word is Swaik, which is a plural of Saika, crackling of lightning. And next term is Khataf, which is used in the next verse, that is 20, to take by snatching. With regard to the geographical conditions in which the Arabs lived and the climatic environment of their lives, for them rain was indeed a blessing. And we can relate to that how much rain is required in a desert-like environment. They would thirst for each and every drop of rain and would view even a speck of cloud expectantly. Consider that if such a cloud ever appeared there, which was laden with water and burst into a downpour at the precise time and desired place, how this event would have been a source of great joy for them. But in these kinds of clouds, darkness, thunder, and the flash and crackle of lightning would also have been encased in them. And we might have also experienced it, particularly during the monsoon period, the lightning and the thunder which is created by the clouds. They generally used to live in tents under the open sky, hence they did not possess those resources by which they could remain protected from the destructions of lightning. Consequently, when these types of clouds would appear, while they would be euphoric at the expectation of the life-giving aspects of the rain, they would also be fearful of lightning strikes. The Quran states, "It is He who shows you lightning by way both of fear and hope," and I have highlighted this fear and hope, "and He who raises up the clouds heavy with rain." Because if we go through the Quran puts before us the consequences of our deeds, particularly the evil deeds, and says, be fearful of committing those deeds. And hope means that there is a hope in following the Quran. So there is a bigger context as well in this term by way both of fear and hope, and we should keep this in mind. Next slide is more on lightning and thunder. They were frightened that the flash of lightning does not snatch away their sights, and that the lightning does not descend upon them in the form of death. And this one feels those kind of feelings if one is exposed to heavy thunder and lightning if one is outside. And this is something which is quite natural if anyone of has experienced it. It should be made clear that this does not mean that Allah only made Barq, Rad, and Saika for destructive purposes. The purpose of their creation is also only for khair. It is stated in Surah Rad also remains busy in making the program of Allah deserving of hamd and appreciation. We now know the benefits of thunderstorms, for example, lightning and thunder. And we can Google it. There is quite a lot over there. For example, these thunderstorms create nitrogen oxide, which is good for as a nutrient. These also create ozone, which is required for the protection of the atmosphere. And of course, there are other benefits related to it. So it's worth having a look. As far as those destructions are concerned which materialize as a result of lightning strikes, the Quran has stated briefly, and this lightning comes down according to the law of Mashiach of Allah, which is a universal law. And we will explain this law of Mashiach slightly later. Knowledge of this law is discovered as in tall buildings, a rod of metal earthing system is installed due to which the destructive electrical wave becomes dormant. The Quran wishes to inform here that both constructive and destructive aspects are concealed in these forces of nature. If these are employed according to the law of nature, then the outcome is solely khair, that is good for us. And if this is not done, then their aspect of shar or evil will overpower. Those who do not have knowledge of these laws devise their own various ways to remain protected. When lightning crackles, By pressing their fingers in their ears, they become contented that we have secured ourselves from its destructiveness. They do not even understand that even if they have protected their power of hearing in this way, there is also the possibility that a flash of lightning may snatch away their sight. Next slide is harnessing the forces of nature is a permanent value under the system of Deen. Now let us take this example further and moving away from the external universe come to human communal life. This world also has two aspects. One aspect is that in which by harnessing the forces of nature, nations obtain useful work from them. We will explain further on in what different ways the Quran has made this fact clear that by conquering the forces of nature, what kinds of uses man can obtain from them, provided he acquires knowledge of those laws according to which these forces remain in operation. And in today's technological advancement and in our world, we witness all this going on around us. In fact, with the passage of time, very quickly, the technology is modifying so rapidly that it is even difficult to keep a pace with that. Whichever nation harnesses these forces in this way, it progresses in the material world. And we did discuss AI, for example, in our last question and answer session. The example of the developed nations is in front of us. Those same events of nature which cause destructions in backward, that is illiterate nations, developed nations have made such arrangements so that they may benefit from the profitable aspects of those forces while remaining protected from their devastations. Next slide is, it is the employment of the outcome of these natural forces which matters. And that is where Quran comes in. Merely acquiring advancement and technology is not enough, because then man is using his intellect, that is unbridled intellect, to utilize these highly powerful applications. And to use those for the good of mankind, we need the guidance of the Quran. This is that aspect of the social system of man where he encounters the controlled and uncontrolled forces of nature. The other aspect of this is that where man has to deal with man. And that is important because never mind how much technology we have still to deal with each other as human beings. Because this system is devised by the intellect and reasoning, what people do is that in their own sphere, they utilize these forces for beneficial purposes. But on the basis of these same forces, they acquire supremacy and control over other nations. By virtue of this, they apparently gain great power. The degree to which they acquire power and supremacy over weaker nations, they fall into this false delusion to a similar degree that this system of theirs has become strong to such an extent that destruction can never visit them. And that is where man makes a huge mistake, that he thinks that he is lying, he is doing all this without any accountability outside the domain of the law of requital. But the Quran declares that this belief of theirs is predicated on flawed vision and self-deception. The strength of the system relating to human social life is not dependent only on the acquisition of material forces. Its deeper connection is also with how those are employed. If these means and resources are utilized for the benefit and welfare of the whole of mankind, then that system becomes strengthened. If these are utilized for their own benefit and for the destruction of others, then this system, no matter how strong it may appear to be, ultimately becomes destroyed. This destruction does not descend all of a sudden. It approaches gradually, and like a creeping fire, it appears from those directions which they can never suspect or imagine. And in today's world, we can see how rapidly the events are changing, particularly in the Middle East. And we should keep an eye on that using the Quranic light. Next slide is nations resorting to injustice do self-harm. In Surah Al-Araf, it is stated, those who reject our signs, we shall gradually visit with punishment in ways they perceive not. They do not perceive because they are not thinking about it. And we can miss obvious signs in case we are not focusing on the events around us. With regard to those people who falsify our laws, we lead them gradually, stage by stage, towards hell through those paths about which they have no knowledge and insight because they have never thought about it. They think that this life is all hunky-dory and they are not accountable for what they do. Never mind having insight, and there will appear to them from Allah that which they had not taken into account. In Surah Al-Nahl, it is stated, those before them did also plot, but Allah took their structures from their foundations, and the roof fell down on them from above, and the punishment seized them from directions they did not perceive. Allah is only relating it to Himself, but if we have discussed this point that it is all about the functioning of the law of requital and the law of respite. O Rasool, not only the nation you are addressing, but nations before them also indulged in such intrigues, but these conspiracies were never successful. Rather, they led them unwittingly towards destructions to the extent that the foundations of their structures were uprooted. Their roofs fell upon them in such a way that they were crushed under their weight. And all this took place in such an imperceptible way that their intellect and consciousness could not even fathom how this devastation appeared and from where. Historical evidence relating to this metaphor. The Quran has stated above that this destruction comes gradually. When this happens, then instead of these nations reflecting on what fundamental weakness is there in our system as a result of which it is heading towards destructions, they think that these cracks have appeared for no reason and can be fulfilled. But what happens is that they address one crack or bend and two further cracks appear on the other side. According to the metaphor quoted by the Quran, in order to remain protected from the crackling of lightning, they plug their ears with their fingers and its flash snatches away their sight. The renowned philosopher of social history, Robert Briffault, writes in his famous book titled The Making of Humanity. It's worth going through this book, and I think free PDF might be available on the internet. And he has discussed a lot using examples from the history. No system of human organization that is false in its very principle, in its very foundation, can save itself by any amount of cleverness and efficiency in the means by which that falsehood is carried out and maintained, by any amount of superficial adjustment and tinkering. And we are seeing this example as well, that despite technology, human beings who are even weaker, they stand up against the very powerful nations as well. There is something within human beings that they tolerate nonsense and injustice for a while, then they stand up against the wrong system. It is doomed root and branch as long as the root remains what it is. The Roman Empire was, as we have seen, a device for the enrichment of a small class of people by the exploitation of mankind. That business enterprise was carried out with all the honesty, all the fairness and justice compatible with its very nature, and with admirable judgment and ability. Because human beings can justify anything. They create such laws to deceive themselves, and they think that they are doing good in the world, whereas the consequences of their evil deeds are showing up everywhere. People are not blind, particularly people who are treated unjustly. They stand up against the wrong system. But all those virtues could not save the fundamental falsehood, the fundamental wrong from its consequences. Their effects worked inexorably. Another interesting aspect of the human psyche. He goes on to say what really happens is that the phase of society, the order of things in which disregard of right is habitual and accepted, inevitably deteriorates and perishes. However much the individual may temporarily benefit by inequity, the social organism of which he is a part and the very class which enjoys the fruits of that inequity suffer inevitable deterioration through its operation. They are unadapted to the facts of their environment. The wages of sin is death by the inevitable operation of natural selection. And this is a very powerful statement with which he concludes this paragraph. The wages of sin is death by the inevitable operation of natural selection. That the law of requital ultimately catches up with the deeds of evil nations. In the verse being discussed, the Quran has explained this very reality using the simile quoted and has summarized it in a few words by stating that Allah is encompassing the kafirin from all directions. And this is the beauty of the Quran. Over here it says it is covering from all directions those who reject the guidance of the Quran and who follow the evil path. They are covered from every direction. And this is a fact that everyone in the world is covered by the law of requital from every direction. The law of requital of Allah is surrounding those who deny truth and haqq, and those who transgress from all directions. They cannot escape from this and go anywhere. And the law of requital is also encompassing mu'mineen as well, but they know it, and they make use of this law of requital to their own advantage by living life and by following the permanent values of the Quran. Hence, the patching and mending by their sharp intellect cannot save them from annihilation. Now we go to the next verse, verse 20. Everything in the universe is subject to laws. Yakadul barko yakhtafu absarahum kullama adalahum mashaw fihi wa iza azlama alayhim qamu walau sha Allahu la zahaba bisamihim wa absarihim inna Allaha ala kulli shay'in qadir. If we remember that this word had been explained previously. It is possible that these people plug their ears with their fingers from fear of the claps of thunder and in this way consider themselves secure from this danger in their own minds. And the flash of lightning snatches away their sight, i.e., the abundance of the means of sustenance produces such darkness in their eyes that their eyes simply do not remain capable of judging places of danger. Are they arranged to stop one danger and another danger crops up from an unexpected direction and destroys them? And this is beautifully Quran has put forward that if we live an unguided life, then we are subjected to all kinds of dangers during our life. We literally live an unprotected life, which ends with death with no self-development. Briefly, understand it as follows. Our law is that whichever nation harnesses the forces of nature, it accrues their benefits. But for those who keep their gaze fixed on the benefits of physical life alone, these benefits are transient, while for those who keep their lofty values in front of them, these are permanent and enduring. Think of the farmer as someone standing lost in the desert, enclosed in a dark cloud night. When the path becomes momentarily illuminated due to a flash of lightning, he can take a few steps in it, but when the darkness descends again, he remains standing still. And what I've done is I have underlined this part, he remains standing still, which means people are living a life of Jahim. Their self is not developing, and doesn't matter what they do in this life, they are in a great loss with every passing day. If we had wished, we could have taken away from these people the means of gaining knowledge, that is, hearing and vision, and in this way simply not have given them the opportunity to acquire benefit from the natural means of nourishment. But we did not do this. We have fixed scales and measurements for everything and have put in place laws and codes. Nothing in the universe can go outside of these scales. We have complete control on these. Elaborating it further, the usual translation is as follows. The lightning all but snatches away their sight. Every time the light helps them, they walk therein, and when the darkness grows on them, they stand still, and if Allah willed, He could take away their faculty of hearing and seeing. For Allah has power over all things. Again, the same issue that for Allah has power over all things, and what is stated earlier, through these translations, these things are not very clear. So that is why it is important to look at the meanings few times. Most of the explanation of this verse has been covered under the interpretation of the previous verse, though a few points are such that they require further elaboration. If Allah had wished, He could have taken away the physical means of acquiring knowledge of these people, i.e., their hearing and sight. But He did not do this. Doing this was This law of Mashiach. And this is the beauty of the Quran, that it puts forward that Allah is capable of doing everything, but He does not do it. And the question before us is why He doesn't do it. And this is something we discuss next. The question is, what is this law of Mashiach of His, and why does He not do this? Understanding the law of Mashiach of Allah, that is how the will of Allah works in the domain of creation. And creation means the world, the universe in which we live physically. When evils become rampant in a society, tyrannical forces of subjugation, exploitation, injustice, and corruption become unbridled, and life becomes intolerable for the weak and helpless at the hands of powerful people. Then in the minds of shallow thinking people, this thought repeatedly arises: why does Allah not paralyze those arms which are used to break the bones of the weak and helpless? And this is the question which does come in the minds of people, that if God is there, why He doesn't do something about it? Why does Allah not turn that hand into stone which is raised to pierce the chest of a victim with a dagger, so that it cannot even move? Why is it that those who indulge in corruption keep enjoying countless prosperities with each passing day? And it's quite interesting that this paragraph is very revealing in the world of 2024, where we know a lot through social media that what is going on in the world in various countries. Their wealth, power, and affluence keep multiplying. They continue to gain all kinds of material benefits. If Allah closed off their paths to acquiring wealth and power, then they will simply not remain capable of unleashing cruelty and tyranny on the poor. This is what Allah should do. Why does He not do this? And this is something which needs to be answered from the Quran. We have gone through these aspects previously as well, but over here under this verse, this is put together very nicely. In reply, Allah states that doing this is against our law of Mashiach. He states that we have implemented physical laws in the physical world, that is, laws of nature, and have told human beings that they can harness the forces of nature by acquiring knowledge of these laws. As a result of this, they will gain all kinds of material benefit. In this, there is no question of kafir and mu'min. Whoever makes an effort according to these laws, he will gain material benefit. The question of the differentiation between Kufr and Iman comes after this, when the problem of the use of these benefits and powers gained through physical laws is confronted. Next is further reflections on the law of Mashiach. The Quran states, if any should desire the immediate benefits of life, we hasten from it what we will, to whom we intend as per the divine laws. Then have we made for them hell, they will burn therein disgraced and banished. That there are laws working over here. If people pursue the immediate benefits of life and accumulate all benefits for themselves, those who are powerful, then obviously it has consequences for everyone in the world. Whoever wishes to achieve the material benefits of the world, we keep conferring these benefits on him according to his efforts and endeavors. And we should keep in mind that Allah is not interfering in any human matter. And this is the focus of the Quran, to inform us from beginning to the end that it is a human world. You do whatever you like. It is your choice. And that is where we should concentrate, that why Allah does not interfere and who interfere on behalf of Allah. When He uses these benefits wrongly, this is called Kufr. Then its outcome is destruction. Contrary to this, it is stated, but whoever desires things of the hereafter, and that is the main thing, whoever desires things of the hereafter, that whoever has Iman in the hereafter and is convinced of it on the basis of evidence within their own self-development, and strives therefore with all due striving and has Iman, they are the ones whose striving is accepted by Allah. So this is what the law of Mashiach is, that some people should stand up on behalf of Allah and counter all the evil which is going on in the world. The individual who acquires material benefits according to the laws of nature and then employs these according to the values defined by us, his effort bears full fruition. As far as physical benefits are concerned, the Quran states, "Of the bounties of your Rabb, we bestow freely on all. These as well as those, the bounties of your Rabb are not closed to anyone." And Rabb over here is related to the means of sustenance in the world. Whether kafir or mu'min, we keep taking both forward according to their efforts and endeavors. We never do this, that we allow one party to advance and place a barrier before the other. And we see it, this is evidence-based, that whoever is making an effort in this world, in the physical domain, they get it. But since they do not know about the permanent values, so they cannot make use of the permanent values which tell man to take into account the good of everyone in the world. Doing this is against our law of Mashiach. The means of sustenance have been provided to the whole of mankind as a bounty, and this arena is open for all equally. Next slide is some verses explaining the law of Mashiach. At another place it is stated, "Whoever desires the life of this world and its adornments, we shall fully repay them for their deeds therein without diminution." This is that law of Mashiach of Allah, according to which He has stated that we do not do this, that we suspend the physical potentials of those who trample on ethical values. Their ruin, despite these abilities, will come about because they transgressed ethical values, because there is a time of respite given to human beings so that they might mend their ways, they might come back to the path of Allah. It states, "But of no profit to them were their faculties of hearing, sight, and heart and intellect when they went on rejecting the signs of Allah, and they were completely encircled by that which they used to mock at." So ultimately, human deeds catch up with human beings. Truly, it is not their eyes that are blind, but their hearts which are within their breasts. This is the reply to this objection of these people, that why does Allah not disable the hands of the unjust? Why He does not turn their arms into stone? It is stated that if Allah had willed, He could have taken away their faculty of hearing and seeing, and this is the statement made in this verse 20. To do this was not at all difficult for Allah, but He does not do this as it is against His law of Mashiach. No change will you find in the practice approved of Allah. So understanding the law of Mashiach of Allah is extremely important, because otherwise the frustration sets in. A lot of people then tend to become atheist, and it makes no difference to Allah. This is a world which is made for human beings to practice their choice and intent and to develop their self. And guidance has been provided, and now it is up to us whether to follow this guidance or not to follow it. It is our choice. Inna Allaha ala kulli shay'in qadir. Now this is the last part of the verse, and this has been explained slightly in more detail. Have you noticed how the Quran has clarified this point? But the commonplace wrong translation of the next part of verse 220 creates one such conundrum, as a result of which not only does this explanation of the Quran become meaningless, instead a contradiction is also created by it, which is against the fundamental claim of the Quran. That part is, "For Allah has power over all things." And this verse is very wrongly understood among the sectarian Islam. These words appear in the Quran frequently, and their meaning is taken to be that Allah is all-powerful. He can do whatever He wishes and does so. He is not bound by any procedure and law. Every matter is dependent on His will. He can do things in whatever way He wants. Have you seen how, according to this interpretation, that whole structure which is raised on the foundations of the Quranic concept of the rule of law comes crashing down? In any case, it is essential that we understand this fully. It will suffice to provide a summary of it here. Details of this aspect of Taqdeer have been covered in the book titled The Book of Destiny by Pervez. And it's an outstanding book in many ways, a very good book for the education and training of children. Explaining two domains, Amr and Khalq. Now, related to this part of the verse, Amr and Khalq is also important to understand. The domain of Allah is not only this material universe, it lies beyond this as well. The Quran has termed the material universe as the domain of khalq, that is creation, and the word beyond as the domain of amr, and stated, remember, both the domains of amr and khalq are his words. We can understand nothing regarding the domain of amr. All we can conceive of is that Allah's intention is in operation there. Or we can say that it is related to the program of Allah's department of planning. That where Allah is making a decision and planning everything, that will be his domain of amr, and we do not know anything about it. For example, why did he create water the way it is? Why did he create fire the way it is? Why did he create human being the way we are? But we can figure it out after following the Quran, after knowing the Quran, that why we have been created the way we are. So that is important. And some of these things will not be clear unless we follow the permanent values of the Quran and acquire a developed self. This is where the decisions are made about what the universe of Khalq should be like, and Khalq means creation. This is where the creative program of Allah is organized and laws for this are devised. Regarding this, it is the decree of Allah that for Allah carries out all that He intends and plans. And this part of the presentation we should hear few times because there is a lot into it, and if we reflect on it, it will keep expanding itself. At another place it is stated, for your Rabb is the sure accomplisher of what he plans. In Surah Al-Ma'idah it is stated, for Allah does command according to his will and plan. He also states, he cannot be questioned for his acts, but they will be questioned for theirs. And which means that all questions have already been answered. If we pay attention to what Quran is telling us, then there will never be a question which is not answered by the Quran. We are limited. We will be putting limits on our own intellect and reasoning if we stop questioning the Quran and not finding an answer. It is there. Explaining Qadr, and this is part of Qadir. This is the domain of Allah's Amr. When according to his Amr, this material universe came into existence, then here his Amr adopted another position. It is stated, and the command of Allah is a decree determined, and the word used is maqdur, that everything is following scales, everything is following laws. If we understand those scales, we understand those values, laws, then we can understand the reason behind everything which is created in the world. The root of this word maqdur is this one, the basic meaning of which is estimation or a scale, and we can look into the Lughatul Quran for further details. The meaning of qadratu shayya is I measured that thing, I estimated it. The meaning of qadratu alayhi tawba is I made clothes according to the measurements of this individual. Hence, the basic meanings of taqdeer are for something to become fitted according to an estimation or scale of it. And maqdarun is that scale, model, or pattern according to which something is made. And it is very clear as well. Just see that in the developed world and all these manufacturing which is going on, human beings are using this mind to create scales. And there is a lot of uniformity now, for example, in the manufacturing of car parts, in the manufacturing of aeroplanes parts and other industry as well. There is so much precision which human beings use to create all these various instruments and industry. In order to make something according to a specific scale and estimate, it is necessary to have full control over this thing. Hence, qadratu ala shayye means I possess this power that I should make this thing according to my pattern. So there is no point in teaching us scales and laws, and we are not able to carry out or apply those laws and scales. And human beings are doing it. Just all this technological advancement which is taking place around us in the world is pointing to this particular part of the verse. According to these meanings of the root, the meaning of this verse will be that Allah's Amr transformed into the mold of the pattern. It became bound by the scales established by Allah. In another verse, it is stated, verily for all things has Allah appointed a due proportion. So we need to figure out those proportion, those correlations, and all that which is implicit in various constituents are in the universe. These are those scales set up by Allah in the physical world, which are called the laws of nature. For example, water is a supporter of life up to an extent, but when it exceeds this limit, it becomes the cause for the death of a human being, as in death due to drowning. This will be called the scale of water. This is what is known as the law of nature. The word law does not appear in the Quran. In its place, various forms of this root have appeared. Regarding these scales, Quran says, "For we determine according to need, for we are the best to determine things." Need to look for scales and laws in the word. The meaning of Qadirun becomes the one who determines scales or the one determining the laws for the material universe. This act of determining scales is called the taqdeer of Allah. So there is no taqdeer of man, there is only taqdeer of Allah, because it is all about laws, scales, values. For example, it is stated in Surah Yasin, "And the sun runs its course for a period determined for it." That is the decree or taqdeer of the exalted in might, the all-knowing. This is that law established by that Allah who possesses knowledge of everything. Though these laws of nature were determined by Allah in the domain of Amr, human beings have been given the ability that they can obtain knowledge about them. It is on this basis that these have been termed as those scales which can be discovered. Conceptually, these scales of Allah are called the words of Allah, kalimatullah. And this is clarified. Allah's words, that is kalimat, do not change. So all words are related to this. Kalimatullah is related to these laws and scales, the way these are defined. And when these same laws of his take practical shape, then these are termed as Sunnat Allah. For this too, it is clarified that you will not find any change in the way of Allah, that is the Sunnat of Allah. In the creative program of Allah, what a great revolution has emerged, i.e. this revolution, that Amr of Allah, which is not bound by any code and procedure, having reached the domain of Khalq, became Maqdur, that is bound by laws. So in the domain of Amr, all those plannings took place, and Allah's will decided that this is how his word is going to be. That is how this particular universe, which is visible to us, is going to be. This is the way these human beings are going to be, and why they are being created, so that they can create a new world according to the system of deen or according to their desires, and then live with the consequences of creating a wrong world. This means that instead of being omnipotent, it transformed into a law, and then such a law that there can never be any change in it. In other words, Allah has imposed a constraint on himself by this. And this is visible as well, that Allah follows his own laws, and he is asking us to follow those laws. So mu'mineen are those who follow Allah's laws the way these are explained in the Quran. And this is an advantage to mu'mineen, because they know the way word is working, and they know that the law of requital is going to favor them if they follow this path. And it's important to understand these two connections, that is of Amr and Khalq, because this is how the Quran reveals itself on us. To conclude, we have gone through some salient aspects of Iman, Kufr, and Munafiqat, which present before us interesting traits of human personality and their manifestations in the outer and inner world. Hypocrisy and its manifestation requires particular attention, as human beings can hide their true intentions, which may be evil, and this can hamper the progress on the path of deen. Just a point regarding Amr and Khalaq, that before Amr, Allah also creates things without anything present, that is from nothing. So that is another stage before the stage of Amr, that everything is created from nothing as well. So Allah has the ability or capability to create from nothing, and then plan, once the things have been created, laws for them, and then make these manifest in the word of creation, where human beings are, and the human beings should understand these three stages in order to benefit from the Quran. In the human world, Allah's Mashiach operates through human beings, i.e., we have to assume all those responsibilities which Allah relates to Himself. For example, equitable distribution of the means of sustenance, meting out justice, keeping peace in the world, stopping those who spread mischief in the world, communicating the message of the pure Quran to wider mankind, organizing and managing education and training for those who have opted to follow the path of Allah in order to establish Deen as a system within the permanent values, through the manifestation of divine attributes related to the human self. Everything in the universe and the world follows the laws of Allah. These laws have two domains, i.e., the physical sphere of life and the sphere of human self-development. When human beings establish their systems contrary to the laws and values of the Quran, then they live a life afflicted by fear and grief, imbalance, conflicts, wars, differences existing at every level, mutual accusations, poverty, exploitation. We can see all this happening in the world of 2024. The Jamaat-e-Momineen does not exist on its own. It has to form through free volition by coming to the guidance of the Quran. For example, verse in Surah Al-Imran says, "Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat lin-nasi ta'muruna bil ma'rufi wa tanhauna 'anil munkari wa tu'minuna billah." You are the best of peoples, ummah arisen from the benefit of mankind, enjoining what is right, forbidding what is wrong, having iman in Allah. So this ummah does not exist. It has to create itself. They have to first become mu'mineen. That is, first they should be seeking guidance, then become mu'mineen, then come together, then work together and develop their self, and then see how things develop in their life on this path. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen.